Hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Jaron.
And hi, I'm Juliane.
And today we're excited to present our findings on the human factors that hinder adversarial machine learning defenses in industry. So as we all know here, machine learning is becoming increasingly used by industry. However, these systems also contain vulnerabilities that can be and have been exploited by adversarial machine learning. For instance, adversarial machine learning has resulted in $76 million worth of fraudulent tax reports by attackers tricking China's facial recognition system used to verify identity, and further has resulted in malware misclassifications on VirusTotal by attackers intentionally uploading malformed malware samples to their site. Furthermore, researchers have also shown and exploited vulnerabilities in other production systems for self-driving cars and facial recognition, email spam and malware detectors, and flagship ML products of multi-billion-dollar companies. So how are these attacks performed? Well, as everyone in the audience might know, typically machine learning systems are segmented into multiple steps known as a pipeline. This includes collecting data, training a model, and deploying the model for user queries. However, adversaries can subvert the system by submitting poisoned data during collection or evading classification via a crafted query, among other types of attacks. But thankfully, effective countermeasures do exist. Certified defenses, if nothing else, can at least increase the difficulty of performing each of these types of attacks. However, prior work has shown that very few industry models actually employ these defenses. But why is this so? We clearly have vulnerabilities, we see instances of real-world exploits, and we have mechanisms that provide protection. So where's the disconnect? Well, we've been ignoring one key factor, and that's the machine learning practitioners who develop and maintain these systems, as well as the pressures that organizations may impose on them. Interestingly, researchers have begun to investigate how human factors do affect these ML defenses. However, we still don't know why certain behaviors exist. For instance, it's reported that practitioners lack AML knowledge. However, there has not been an investigation on what prevents practitioners from learning this knowledge in the first place. It's reported that practitioners don't assess AML to be a threat to their systems. However, little work has investigated whether this assessment process is misleading in and of itself. And lastly, it's reported that practitioners have difficulty in implementing defenses. However, little work has considered how company structures, cultures, and incentives might contribute to this. Thus, our work attempts to better understand the root causes of several of these barriers. More specifically, we asked 3 research questions. First, what barriers prevent machine learning practitioners from adequately understanding attacks and defenses? Second, what prevents practitioners from assessing the risk that adversarial machine learning poses to their own systems? And third, what barriers prevent practitioners from effectively implementing adversarial machine learning defenses in their systems? To investigate this, we recruited 21 participants from all portions of the ML pipeline to discuss their experiences with adversarial machine learning. We interviewed each participant for 90 minutes and discussed how they learn new knowledge, an overview of their ML system, and their perceptions and responses to adversarial machine learning. We then analyzed this data to synthesize a set of barriers that practitioners face towards implementing defenses. So the results, we find that barriers exist within each one of these steps towards an ML defense. So beginning with exposure, we find that practitioners are generally poorly exposed to adversarial machine learning due to the security culture developed in machine learning industry, as well as the educational structure that we provide to them. So first of all, a large barrier towards secure practices was the belief that security and privacy is irrelevant to machine learning. While participants tended to understand that sensitive data could lead to privacy risks, these concerns rarely translated to the models themselves. For instance, when one participant discusses privacy concerns, they note that the main issue is the data. I don't think anything specific to the model, since in general, the data shouldn't be leaked. Some participants took this one step further, believing that machine learning and security and privacy are completely orthogonal from one another. As one participant states, they consider machine learning and computer science in general as completely and wholly separate from cybersecurity. However, once participants tended to understand through our interviews that there were fundamental connections between model design and the security and privacy that they entail, they tended to express more interest in understanding and mitigating adversarial machine learning risks. One participant, for instance, noted that it's good to know about security and the problems models may face, and that they just might want to find some more courses to learn about them. Thus, this might imply that awareness is a primary issue rather than a lack of genuine interest from practitioners. However, we also find that awareness of adversarial machine learning is significantly hampered by a lack of institutional motivation. As one participant notes, machine learning is a very fast, large moving field, and it often appears coincidental what new knowledge they come across. Because of this, several participants note that learning is typically targeted and guided by a few key motivators. However, within these motivators, we find a lack of general guidance towards adversarial machine learning concepts. Functional project requirements was the most commonly reported source of learning motivation. However, only one participant ever recalled being assigned an AML-related requirement. And this may be in part due to those who assign tasks such as management and clientele were often not perceived as technical by participants and thus unlikely to understand adversarial machine learning, much less require it. For instance, in one back and forth with a client, one participant noted that they had to insist on adversarial machine learning requirements, noting that adversarial machine learning is not just something read in a paper, but actually something that is real and occurs. Furthermore, educational programs were reported as a foundational learning experience. However, AML content was only reported to be found in graduate-level engineering programs among our participants. As many of our participants only held bachelor's or were from other fields entirely, many may have not had the opportunity to learn about adversarial machine learning. And for the next part of the talk, Juliane will take over.
Yeah, thank you, Jaron. And now that we've heard about some problems with the general exposure to AML concepts, I'm going to continue talking about the barriers that practitioners faced when they tried to assess the AML threats to their own systems, which should inform their decision about defense implementation. And we find that both misconceptions and a lack of assessment tools hinder their ability to accurately assess those threats. Yeah, so where some of our practitioners were aware of AML, their knowledge was often incomplete and held misconceptions. And both incorrect threat models and also a misunderstanding of defenses held a huge potential for unseen vulnerabilities. So let's take, for instance, evasion attacks. Some of them require only a very weak threat model, where the attacker requires black box access to the model's API. However, one of our participants believed that evasion attacks would not be problematic for them because they thought that they could only occur once the attacker already had access to their backend and could freely modify data. And as they noted, at this point, they would probably have much larger concerns elsewhere. I'm so sorry. Yeah. And in addition to these misconceptions, and contrary to security in traditional software development, neither the assessment nor the monitoring of the machine learning systems really accounted for adversarial machine learning. So most participants evaluated their models for performance with metrics using like the F1 score, and some also monitored their production models for example, for post-prediction accuracy. But such generic measures cannot really catch AML attacks that don't largely degrade the performance of the models. Only one participant reported to have AML-specific evaluation of their model, and none reported any AML-specific monitoring. Additionally, some of the participants performed manual and ad hoc edge case testing, and one participant described how they promised treats to their team if anyone could break the model in a sort of informal penetration testing process. So this implies that some of the practitioners do care about evaluating the security properties of their models, they just don't have effective and systematic methods to do so. Okay, so coming to the last parts of our results, so once the threats are properly assessed, you still have to implement your defenses, and we find that there's organizational structures and values that can hinder this. So for the first point, it's important to understand that attacks can harm a different portion of the pipeline than they actually interact with. So for example, data poisoning will likely occur in the data collection phase, but the harm will only become apparent once there's malicious predictions in the deployment. I'm so sorry, I think there's something wrong with my clicker. I might just switch to going with this. So luckily, we do have ways to defend against data poisoning. For example, data can be cleaned in the collection and processing phase, and also adversarial robust training can be performed in the modeling phase. However, this requires a certain level of collaboration, and we find that this is actually a barrier. So different parts of the pipeline were handled by different people, teams, or even departments, and we find that those were very isolated and had very little or no insight into each other's work. For instance, one participant collected and cleaned data, but they didn't know what kind of model this data would be used for, and this would make it very hard to consider any potentially relevant poisoning attacks in their data cleaning. And on the other side of that, one of our participants was building and deploying models, but they didn't know about the data gathering or the processing. So they could not know if in the data they got from another internal department, they would still have to account for poison data in their model training. And going beyond the machine learning pipeline, we found that organization security teams were even further removed. One participant noted how they had never worked with the organization security team at all and believed them to live in a completely different world. And unfortunately, this means that the machine learning pipeline could not benefit from any security knowledge that might be present elsewhere in the organization. The final barrier to the implementation of defenses that I want to talk about is competition with other organizational goals. Like in traditional IT security, many organizations would rather spend their time on new features and functionality rather than security. And many also said that AML experts were a good thing to have, but they were just too expensive for most project budgets. And as a specific thing to machine learning, some defensive techniques can directly decrease the accuracy of models. And some of our participants said that they would accept a sort of trade-off here, but especially those that did financial forecasting with their models, where the accuracy would be directly linked to the revenue that was generated, they said that the trade-off cannot be accepted. And as one of those participants summarized, the bank doesn't want to lose any money. The security guys need to adopt, not the modelers. So to come to some recommendations, ultimately, we don't think that we can expect machine learning practitioners to be the singular point of defense against all AML-related threats. However, similar to software engineering roles, we do believe that they should at least be aware of the risks that are inherent in the products that they develop, and they should also be able to effectively communicate these risks to other stakeholders, such as management or specialized teams, who may then help address them. To achieve this, we recommend a set of measures to improve the defensive agility of organizations and to foster preparedness for threat mitigation. First, in order to remedy the lack of exposure and understanding of AML, we recommend that educators cover AML in formal education already starting at undergraduate levels, and also that they provide more resources for online learning of AML. Second, to facilitate the practitioner's security consciousness and involvement, we recommend that organizations should promote security champions, so individuals that foster security-centric thinking in their departments, as well as embed security into their machine learning processes. And finally, in order to improve the assessment of threats, we recommend that defense experts should raise practitioners' awareness of AML-related toolsets and provide accessible solutions that minimize implementation cost and performance degradation in order to accommodate business constraints. These was only some of our results, and to see all of them, we encourage you all to go check out our paper. Thank you for listening to our talk, and we're now happy to take any questions.